A little girl in the crowd made a strange hand gesture that no one understood except the royal guard. A few seconds later, the little boy broke formation, stopping the entire parade, and what happened next left everyone stunned into silence. Before we continue, let us know where you are watching from in the comments and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow, at this exact moment, we will reveal another powerful story about the Royal Guard that you won't want to miss. It was a beautiful June morning in London, with the kind of sunshine that made Buckingham Palace gleam like something out of a postcard. Tourists from around the world had gathered early to secure a spot for the changing of the guard, an event steeped in centuries of British tradition. Children sat perched on their parents' shoulders, waving miniature flags and pointing excitedly at the crimson-coated guards. Among the crowd stood a quiet 7-year-old girl named Lily Davis. Her blue dress looked a little too heavy for the warm weather, and her posture was unnaturally still for someone her age. Beside her stood her stepfather, a tall man with sharp features and a tense grip on her small wrist. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place, but for Sergeant Theo Marwood, who had served 8 years with the Royal Regiment, trained to detect signs of danger in the most subtle movements, something didn't sit right. While other children bounced with excitement, Lily barely blinked. Her eyes flicked between the guards and the man beside her. It was this quiet, deliberate stillness, not fear of the guards, but something deeper that drew Marwood's attention and would soon alter the course of that ceremonial morning forever. Sergeant Theo Marwood had seen a lot in his 8 years of active duty service: tours in combat zones, dangerous patrols, and tense moments that demanded split-second decisions. But nothing had prepared him for the look in Lily Davis's eyes. As he stood motionless in his ceremonial uniform, observing the crowd with disciplined precision, something about the girl's posture continued to trouble him. She wasn't merely shy or overwhelmed by the grandeur of Buckingham Palace. She was scared, profoundly so. Then, amidst the rhythmic beat of ceremonial drums and the shuffling of tourists adjusting their phones, Marwood saw her do something no one else appeared to notice. Lily raised her hand, closed it into a fist, and pressed it into her open palm. It was subtle, almost invisible in the flow of the crowd, but Marwood recognized it immediately. It was the universal hand signal taught to children in schools across Canada and the UK alike, a silent plea for help, used when words can't be spoken. In that moment, all the training, all the protocol, faded into the background. A child was in danger, and one man had seen her call for help when no one else had. It was a moment that defied centuries of military protocol. As the changing of the guard ceremony unfolded with its usual grandeur, Sergeant Theo Marwood did the unthinkable. He stepped out of line. With the eyes of hundreds of tourists watching and cameras clicking, he broke formation, walking calmly but deliberately toward the edge of the crowd. To the untrained eye, it may have looked like a mistake. To those who understood military discipline, it was a rare breach, one that would only happen for a very good reason. Marwood didn't shout or draw his weapon. His movements were composed, calculated, the kind of calm urgency that only comes from someone who has seen danger in many forms. His gaze never wavered as he approached Lily Davis and the man gripping her wrist. He had seen bruises, fear, and finally, the hand signal that no soldier trained for public service could ignore. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing the gravity of the moment. Whispers rippled through the tourists. "Is this part of the ceremony?" someone asked. But Marwood wasn't performing. He was responding, not as a guard bound by ceremony, but as a soldier bound by duty. In that split second, he reminded everyone watching that beneath the ceremonial uniform was a protector, willing to put everything on the line when someone, especially a child, needed help. It was more than breaking formation. It was a display of courage that shattered expectations. When the little girl's stepfather realized she had signaled for help, panic flickered behind his false smile. He gripped Lily's wrist tighter and tried to drag her away through the crowd. But standing directly in his path was Sergeant Theo Marwood, no longer just a ceremonial guard, but a trained protector. With quiet resolve and a voice firm, yet composed, Marwood ordered the man to release the child. The stepfather, unwilling to back down, lashed out. But what happened next wasn't violence, it was control. In one smooth motion, Marwood used a restraint technique taught in military training. It was not aggressive, not excessive, just enough to neutralize the threat and shield Lily from further harm. The man, who had underestimated the silent strength behind the uniform, found himself on the ground, restrained not by force, but by precision. Witnesses stepped forward. An elderly couple, a young mother, even tourists with footage on their phones, all confirmed what Marwood had suspected. Bruises on Lily's arms, the man's aggressive grip, and her constant fear. The bruises weren't accidental. The behavior wasn't harmless. As officers arrived, it became clear that Marwood's intervention had prevented something far worse. And while the ceremony may have stopped for just a few minutes, something more meaningful took its place. A soldier standing firm, not for royalty, but for a frightened child who needed someone to believe her. As the stepfather was escorted away in handcuffs, his threats fading into the distance, Lily remained frozen. Though the danger was gone, her small body still trembled, a reaction shaped by fear that had built over months, maybe years. She sat quietly, shoulders hunched, unsure if things were really going to be different. Then Sergeant Theo Marwood approached. He had removed his tall bearskin cap and knelt beside her, his voice gentle yet steady. "I believed you," he said, "and I always will." In that moment, something shifted. Lily's eyes, once dulled by fear, met his. A silence passed between them, not the silence of worry, but of recognition. For the first time, she saw not a man in a uniform, but someone who had chosen to stand up for her when no one else did. And then she smiled, not the careful, fearful smile of a child trying to stay safe, but a real one, the kind born from hope. In that brief moment, a soldier's duty transcended ceremony, and a little girl took her first steps toward healing because someone finally saw her, believed her, and chose to act. While police officers took witness statements and began the formal investigation, Sergeant Theo Marwood made a quiet decision that would change both his life and Lily's forever. As an active duty soldier, trained not only in combat, but in compassion, Marwood was also certified under the regiment's Emergency Foster Care Program, a little-known initiative that supports vulnerable children in crisis. He stepped forward without hesitation. "I may not have all the answers," he said softly to Lily, "but I can promise you one thing. You'll never be hurt again." Later that afternoon, Marwood filed the initial paperwork to adopt her. It wasn't a publicity move, and it wasn't out of obligation. It was a choice, a commitment from one human being to another. Not just to offer safety, but to offer a sense of family, belonging, and unconditional care. For Lily, it meant far more than escaping harm. It meant she was finally wanted. For Marwood, it was a new kind of duty, one not of medals or rank, but of fatherhood freely chosen. And in that act, a soldier became something even greater, the guardian of a little girl's future. What happened that day at Buckingham Palace was more than a disruption of protocol. It was a quiet lesson in what real strength looks like. Sergeant Theo Marwood didn't raise his voice, didn't brandish his authority. He simply saw a vulnerable child, recognized the unspoken cry for help, and acted with courage, calm, and purpose. In a world where we often confuse power with noise and dominance, Marwood showed that strength is sometimes quiet. It's found in stillness that masks readiness, in gentleness that stands guard, and in action that puts another's safety above appearance or protocol. The crowd, many of them tourists, had come expecting pageantry. Instead, they witnessed something rare and real, a soldier protecting not a crown or a gate, but a child who needed someone to believe in her. It's a moment that resonated far beyond palace walls, reminding us all, especially in today's world, that honor isn't about medals or rigid posture. It's about humanity. To the seniors who have seen the world change, and to the generations who follow, this story speaks a universal truth. The strongest people are those who step forward when others stay silent. The story at Buckingham Palace was not just about a soldier breaking formation. It was about the power of compassion and the responsibility we share as human beings. In a fast-paced world where indifference often takes over, Sergeant Marwood's actions reminded us that it's never too late to do what's right, and no one is ever too small to be heard.